Good morning, everybody. You're tuned into Crackcore. So, today we're going to be talking about the polarisation of the population of planet Earth. I mean, has anybody else noticed this? I mean, obviously there's a lot to be polarised with regards to opinion, right about now. I mean, as we usually do, for context, it's the 28th of the 8th, so the 28th of August 2021. Now, I mean, quite fittingly, I'm wearing a t-shirt that says "Curb Your Ego" on the front of it this morning, completely by chance. Excuse me while I just have a sip of coffee. Oh, lovely. Colombian. So anyway, a lot of this is down to ego. The polarisation is down to ego, in my opinion. But we'll get to that. So, I mean, first of all, I think we need to start looking at a few references. Now, I've noticed over the past few years, now I've been into this kind of stuff. I've been into, looking at information, no matter what that may be, just soaking up information. The predominant amount of my information, I will admit, does come from independent sources, because I believe personally that that's the best place, to get your information from. I'm not saying that there isn't any agendas and, potential gain to have from corruption in those kind of places, in those areas. But there is less. I'm pretty sure there is less. You look at, say, for instance, government-backed or government-funded organisations. The governments themselves, they're all corruptible because they're all power-driven and ultimately, financially driven at the same time. And they've got a lot of influence. So therefore, or at least have the potential to have a lot of influence. So therefore, anybody that wants to corrupt, would absolutely corrupt those areas first and foremost. Just as a process of elimination. You'd go for the top dogs, wouldn't you? So based on that analogy, you'd have to say then that independent media would potentially have less of this going on. I'm sure there is still some. But usually that would happen as folks gain notoriety. These independent sources. To hold out when somebody's offering you a massive wad of cash would be extremely difficult. I mean, as we progress through our lives, we can't blame these people for wanting financial security. After all, we do live in a financial, system, or at least a system that is, governed by finance and what it is you have. Against what it is you don't have. And basically that does give motivation for, certain things. And especially when it comes down to, wanting a better life and wanting a more secure life as you get older, as the risks of, certain things become more apparent, such as, what's your life been for? If you can't be comfortable in your old age, that kind of mentality. So anyway, as we get past our little digression there, I think what we have to do then is just say, well, over the years, through the information that I've looked at least, there has been many people talking about, I mean, as recently as, say for instance, 2 years ago, there was people talking about a mass polarisation with regards to the population of planet Earth, and that was based on their spirituality and how they were basically going to act based on that. Now, I mean, ultimately, what it is you come into contact with information-wise and all these other things do have an effect, do have an impact on who you are. And then, by design, your spirituality then is affected at the same time. because in my opinion, all these things are connected. I mean, just as a point of reference here, Ken Wilber would say that is the art of growing up and waking up. That's basically the parallel paths, and everybody is on a different one based on where they are along those two lines with regards to waking up and growing up. So ultimately, the polarization that's happened in society, you've got to admit, if you look around, it's apparent more than ever, now more than ever. I mean, like I said, there are a lot of things to be polarized about right now, but you see, in my opinion, that's potentially by design, because then you've got to look at what it is that's creating this polarization. Well, first and foremost, it's the propaganda media, isn't it? It's the propaganda media, those that are funded and are in the back pockets of the government. And then you have to say, well, then by design, the governments themselves are potentially controlled by sources larger than them that have bigger back pockets than them. And these agendas are pushed. This separation agenda, it's pushed because it would serve to keep people at war with one another. If the way you maintain power over the population is to keep them fighting amongst themselves. Now, why would these people want power over the population of planet Earth? Well, first of all, you'd have to say, well, who's big enough? And in what position would you have to be in order to, be in a position where you are able to, first and foremost, have power, and then, to maintain it? Well, you'd have to be in a position that was very, very financially secure. You'd have to be quite possibly some of the richest people on planet Earth, but not just in finance. You'd have to have a lot of land, a lot of property, therefore, and actual physical assets, such as, precious metals and so on. Now, looking into who owns the most of that type of stuff would probably be the way you could look at the potential candidates for who is actually controlling the puppet show, because they would be the people, in my opinion, that would have the most to not only gain but therefore to lose from a lack of power, because through their power they are able to maintain their wealth. And what is wealth? I mean, it's an addiction, isn't it? When you've got less and less money, you tend to spend more of it, don't you? If you're a person that gets paid minimum wage, you live for the day, you live for the day and you enjoy life most of the time. That's why you see poor people are really happy a lot of the time, because they just fucking live for the day, man. It's carpe diem. But you see, the more and more money that people get, it's a general consensus that people then start to want to hoard it, because once you've got it, you don't want to lose it. So then you start to fear being poor and fear not having the things you are now, happy and comfortable with. Like perhaps it comes down to having a nice house, decent food, without GMOs and stuff, and a nice car maybe. Perhaps you've got a materialistic partner that would leave you if you were not as financially secure, and you don't want to lose that side of your life either. All of these things do add to, and this is just for the common man, these things do add to the desire to maintain a certain type of physical wealth or stability. Now, when you move up into the other echelons of society, well, it becomes about more than just money and stuff like this. It would become about what you can back that up with. Now, for instance, with certain things, it becomes like, status. What title you have. If you're a lord or a lady or, this or that. Then obviously that comes with lands, property. You own things that other people then pay you a fee to either use or live upon, these kind of things. So then that way you own part of the planet. And then after that, you've got things, I suppose on the same tier there, you have things like precious metals and so on. Because all money is supposed to be backed by precious metals. Apparently. It says on the English money, at least it used to, I haven't checked recently, but it used to say, I promise to pay the bearer the sum of. And then it would be equivalent to the amount that note was worth. So for instance, if it was a £10 note, it would be, I promise to pay the bearer the sum of £10. And apparently that goes back to a time where it was a receipt for an actual physical pound of gold. So then you would be able to say, well, here's my receipt, you take it to a bank, and they would say, and here's your pound of gold. So ultimately, if you remember in America when all the prospecting was happening, potentially, people would pay in little lumps of gold. You'd pay for a round of beers and a little nugget of gold or whatever. So that was the currency. And then it became too difficult to lump around bags of gold with the more that you were able to find. So you had to basically store it somewhere, and then they gave you a receipt. And that's ultimately the birth of paper money. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I would love to be corrected if I am wrong, because in that way I'm not going to be spewing shite that isn't correct. Making myself look like a tit on video. But I believe potentially that's at least in part where our physical paper money comes from. So now we've looked at basically the system of why somebody would want to maintain their power. You then got to come back down the pyramid and say, well, at that point they would have to manipulate people financially and perhaps through other means of emotional blackmail, these kind of things, to get them to do what they want, because they now want to stay where they are. Because again, if ultimately all of a sudden the population of planet Earth, being in their billions, find out that these people have been hoarding all of this wealth and power and been doing this type of stuff to the people for such a long time, well, there'll be a massive backlash. So fear for these people probably comes into it as well, which in my opinion is a good thing, because if they are willing to do what they're doing to such a degree, well, it does show that at least on some level they are afraid of us, the people, which does show in effect the amount of power we actually have. So by design then, you could say then that the people that govern the population and the system therefore that puts these people in place would ultimately be a corrupted system, because it is then controlled by design by the people that want that system to remain in place, because by the system remaining in place, it allows them as well to remain in place. So through these channels of information, because information is how you basically live your life. You live your life based on the information that you come into contact with, that you expose yourself to. Again, you could look at the algorithms of the internet and how that creates an echo chamber. So you're only ever really confronted with the information that you are wanting to be confronted with, and so on and so forth, to basically quell people's questioning mind. These people can then put information out on that internet source and circulate propaganda, which ultimately then allows people through these same algorithms to become polarized. And through this polarization, what happens is people never truly unite. And so long as people aren't united, so long as society isn't integrated with one another, to steal another word based on Zen, the Zen, integral Zen, the integration of society. As long as society is not integrated, then ultimately people will never truly move forward and evolve as a whole. because the majority will always hold the few back to a degree, and stifle progression. Now, ultimately, progression, in my opinion, is unstoppable, and it will progress, and it will progress in a positive way, because it may happen, you know, at a smaller rate, you know, but ultimately it will always happen. You have to look at society and the way things have happened over the years, and, you know, good does tend to win out eventually, because ultimately, in order for people to realize that good is the way, things have to actually get so bad. So actually, this constant give and take, this wave of good and bad that happens, you know, over the generations, is just a natural process in our civilization. So ultimately, right now, we're seeing polarizations that are causing conflict, but only through that conflict will we therefore realize unity. Excuse me. And on that note, I think that's a good place to end this video, because unity is what we're going to need in order to get through the you know, the dark times that are ahead. But only through those dark times will we actually realize that unity is the way. So stay strong, remain steadfast, and I'll see you on the other side. This is Cragcore. I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to wish love and peace to all things everywhere. Peace.